Welcome to the Magical Salon, where two regular people, Amanda and James, explore mystical ideas and big questions. From books to pop culture, if it's a doorway to something deeper, we're probably into it. We're not experts, and maybe you aren't either, but that's kind of the point. Welcome back to the Magical Salon. I'm Amanda, your humble scholar.
And patroness. And I'm James, your resident alchemist. So anyways, we were talking earlier, patroness, and we were discussing specifically the idea of portals, but books as portals. And for you and I, like, look at this room right now, there's books everywhere. So reading and books obviously are magical in their own way to us, or have had important kind of roles in both of our lives. And I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were on reading, your history with it. Like, is there a book you remember where you were like, wow, this is kind of cool? Because to me, I've been thinking about reading a lot lately. I've been doing a lot of reading, and you're now reading some books set in a specific time or time of year. And that's kind of giving you glimpses into synchronicities and little things like that.
Yeah, so I guess, what do you mean, like, my history with reading? Like, in regards to what?
As a kid, right? Like, oh, my mom would read me Winnie the Pooh or something, or I really loved Harry Potter, and I would stay up reading into the night.
You can't speak of Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling is problematic.
It's kind of weird to just not even acknowledge it, because we both read it, and that was like a huge cultural icon growing up. It was like a magic school. Obviously, that's why dark academia and stuff is popular now, probably, because it's cool. Everybody wants to wake up one day and it's like, magic's real. You're special, Harry. Save the world, right?
For me, like, I've always loved magic. Like, the concept of magic has always resonated with me. And yeah, like, I always wanted to be taken on a grand quest or told I had magical powers. And so I've kind of always been ready and wanting to believe in that. And partially that's due to books. Because yes, there's magic on TV, but like, with the exception of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which we referenced in our first episode as well. We've talked about this before, you and I, but the thing with books is that it puts the onus on you to create something out of nothing, similar to what the writer did. Yes, you have some idea of what is supposed to be happening, but ultimately you have to fill in some gaps and you have to conjure some kind of an image for yourself. So it leads you to like create more intricate world in comparison to TV. And so that's why also I think, especially when, like, I mean, we talked about Eragon, how they butchered those movies, but it's really difficult to go from this super cool fantasy world in a book form, and then you have to make it onto the big screen.
I mean, Eragon was one of the books I had written down in addition to like Potter. Eragon, to me, it was kind of just like a ripoff of Star Wars, I think, which is a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. It doesn't matter, but like, the point is, like, the idea of a dragon that he could communicate with, because you like bond, so they can telepathically talk to each other and stuff. I remember that being a really cool just like concept to me, to kind of be in sync with another communicating like that. And then I remember one of the books, I think he could say a magic word because he had powers too, right? In addition to just being a badass dragon rider or whatever. But he also could say Brissinger, I think, and it was the name of the sword, and it would like make his sword burst into flames. And it was just kind of, those were just cool ideas, right? Very magical fantasy. And the whole world was cool. And yeah, you could kind of get lost in your own head, kind of. And in some ways, I think reading is a bit meditative. It's kind of like guided meditation in some ways, because to your point, the author is trying to paint an image or something, but they're just kind of giving you the outline. And then it's up to you, the reader, to create, to fill in the blanks and to like create the image in your own mind of what that world looks like. So you can be as immersed or just not even reading at all, right? Like, it's kind of up to how much you put in some ways as well, of your own attention.
In terms of early books, my mom really liked the Lord of the Rings books, and so I remembered reading those, and I liked The Hobbit the best. And I remember, like, in 8th grade, my reading teacher, she recommended Twilight. And so then I remembered going home and like telling my parents that my teacher had recommended this and thus they should buy it for me. And then I ended up getting it right. And there were some raunchy moments in there, which is why it's funny because I'm not sure they would have bought that for me if it hadn't been for my teacher's recommendation. So thank you to my teacher, whose name I do not recall. But I do remember what she looked like. But anyways, so then we have Maximum Ride, which I was obsessed with.
I forgot about that.
And then most recently, I mean, I know the book series has gotten like some flack, but A Court of Thorns and Roses.
What did it get flack for?
Problematic. Anyway, the point is, because I went to grad school for creative writing, I think I lost my fantasy love for a long time. Like that kind of went dormant inside me because I was only reading literary fiction and only writing literary fiction, and for some reason I just cast it out. But then I kind of lost that like completely from my life, and I feel like I wasn't like as imaginative in those days. And so most recently, I read that like a few years ago now, and that sparked my love for reading and my love for fantasy. That was one of the first things I had read in a long time, where you're staying up into the night reading it. That's truly like transcending, sort of, like, because you're like so invested in the story that you can read for 12 hours straight into the night. Nothing matters except for your book. You're like that immersed in it.
That's interesting. I wonder though, like, I feel like there's people, to kind of go back to the earlier question of like, what do you mean being a reader, or how reading impacted you or whatever, when I kind of opened it up very broadly initially. But it's like, what do you say, kind of, what does it mean to be a reader? Because there's some people that will say, I don't read, right? So, okay, what does it mean to be a reader? Do you have to read a certain number of pages a day? Do you have to have read certain books to get the prestige of being called a reader? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I've never quite thought about it like that. There's no benchmark that you need to meet. If you want to call yourself a reader, then you should and are. For a while, I thought I couldn't really call myself a writer because like I didn't have any publications or whatever. Oh, I can't call myself that until I have a book published, right? Which is ridiculous, right? It's like, oh, I mean, I am a writer. Like, what is it? It's a person that writes. And if I do that, if I read it all, then I'm a reader. But there's like some degree of, people always try and hierarchize reading. They're like, oh, well, if you read graphic novels, then that's not real reading. If you read comics, same thing. Manga, a lot of things like that. And then it's like, if you're reading the classics, then you're top tier. If you're reading fantasy, well, that's not art, right? So then it's like, why can't we just enjoy these things? Because at the end of the day, there's not that many people reading at the end. But this is what I wrote down about reading. I feel like ultimately reading is you're learning, reflecting, and soaking in other people's experiences, which requires effort and empathy, which some people do not want to expend or cannot expend.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, yeah, I think I saw at some point, and this was a long time ago now, but like people that read are more empathetic. However you grade that. But I mean, it kind of makes sense just intuitively. Like, okay, I could believe that. To your point, you're kind of immersing yourselves in different worlds. And the idea of you don't need to hierarchize it because it's all reading. And if reading that specific genre or type of book or author is it for you, like you can get into the flow kind of, or just it brings you joy kind of, or you enjoy that point of view, I guess, or their way of thinking. Sometimes you can kind of be transported, right? So it's like, it doesn't matter. It's kind of the wheel, going back to episode 1 too. It doesn't matter if you're reading history or if you're reading romantasy or if you're reading hardcore sci-fi where it's like math proofs are in the pages and stuff. It's like, if that's what gets you reading, that's good, because it's your own imagination and you are an active participant in the creative process while reading.
My old job, the executive director, and he would be like, oh, what's everybody reading? And then usually there would be silence. So then he would chime in and then say, oh, like, I'm reading, and it was always like some very serious, worldly sounding book, right? Obviously very nonfiction oriented. And then someone else would chime in with, another book of that sort. And then immediately it puts like everybody else off, even if they are reading things, because, well, I can't say I'm reading fairy smut now because these people are reading like these serious nonfiction books. But I also think the empathy thing, why it pertains more to reading than TV and movies, I would say. I think there's still something to be said, depending on like what kind of TV and movies you consume. But for books specifically, you're like exploring people's inner worlds, which you spoke about last episode, and not just exploring their outer worlds, because a lot of times with TV and movies, you're looking at it, so it can sometimes feel somewhat two-dimensional. You're not experiencing anything from inside a character's head. And sometimes when they say things out loud, it feels very contrived and takes me out of it, because I'm like, that's not what it would be like to be there. And I get that there's constraints of any genre, but that's never resonated that much with me. Or even just, here's a note, like I'm alone, but I'm gonna read it out loud.
Yeah, that is always weird. How many books do you read at once? I would say for me personally, I'm not good at just reading a single book at a time. Like, oh, I'm going to read this book, then I will read that. So I probably am reading at least 2, up to like 4 or 5, but some of the books I'm reading aren't plot driven. Most of them aren't. So it's not like, oh, I have to keep these characters. It's like, okay, I'm reading about this idea or whatever. So it's like, okay, I can just kind of like rest on that for a little and then come back to it. To the wheel idea, I don't try to restrict myself to one type of book. Or so if a certain book is more intriguing at a time, then I'll just kind of read that. And then if something's not really gripping me, or it's just not resonating at that point in time, I'll set it aside sometimes and then come back to it later.
I used to never not finish books, even if it took me months to get through them, which was a lot of wasted reading time. So now I just stop reading them if they don't resonate with. And I mean, I'm looking over there at the table. I have like 10 books over there. I would say there's usually like 1 or 2 books I'm actively reading, and then the other ones are sort of on a list as potentialities, but and occasionally I do reach for them, but I'm not as actively reading them.
So you said something interesting. You'll DNF a book now. When do you DNF a book? You said after, if it doesn't resonate. Is that 20 pages, 50 pages, 100? Or is it, I read 3 pages and I just know this is not gonna be a book for me at this time?
Well, usually if it's 3 pages, then I feel like I need to come back to it at a different point and try again. I would say usually I give it a shot, so it's usually around 50 pages for me. I try not to DNF before then, because you kind of have to settle into the way that the author writes and give it some time to do something. But if truly nothing has happened and it's ass after 50 pages, then I will just stop reading it. However, it's not like if I read 50 pages and it's good, then I have to finish it, because it's also possible that as I get to the end, it could just completely go off the rails, at which point I would just DNF it there. There's been books where I've stopped reading even 30 pages from the end.
What about classic? Do you like classics, or do you prefer to read more modern contemporary stuff by and large? Because there's some people that swear off classics, and then I feel like there's some people that exclusively read classics.
I mostly read contemporary stuff. So if anything, I read contemporary classics, perhaps.
Contemporary classic. That's a funny phrase. Karlov Knausgård.
Well, Carl was definitely a portal for me when I was reading my struggle books, because he would literally just be writing about his so-called boring day-to-day life throughout multiple years. It's like somewhat insignificant moments, but then of course the significant ones too. But they were both equally beautiful. Just like the minute things that you kind of take for granted about seeing someone write them beautifully. Not only does it help you appreciate it more, but then you kind of get sucked in.
What you just described is why Carl was magical to you, because going back to our first episode, I think we touched on it. It's kind of an empowering thing, magic. And I think reading encourages creativity in your day-to-day life. And reading somebody like Carl describe a boring, banal day where he's complaining about something, but also recognizing beauty, or you're like, wow, that's beautiful, just to read it. It's like, well, yeah, I should just appreciate my own backyard a little bit more. It's all kind of how you look at the world. And when you wear certain shades of glasses or a different perspective from a different author at certain times, it can really just kind of resonate, and you can appreciate your own life more, I think, or look for small little magical instances.
I mean, she does that in Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf, because there's some character having like a breakdown, or I think they're just unhappy, right? And they're in the street, just seeing everything very dark, very negatively. And then she kind of just describing the scene, and it's very beautiful, right? And it's just like beauty is everywhere and anywhere. That's ultimately what it comes back to for me when people say be present. Because if you're truly being present, then you would be acknowledging the beauty in every moment, which is ultimately living a life of love.
Being here now, right? Being present. But I think specifically, yeah, that book, right? Like that was definitely transformational, I guess. Like, I guess that's why it's interesting, because books are things people will read and they'll be like, oh, this turned my life around or something, right? People can be saved, but like touched by books, for lack of a better word, in a very unique and incredibly powerful way, right? Which is cool to think that some paper and glue with some ink in it can spur a person to kind of change the course and trajectory of their life. That's pretty powerful to think about. It's a very impactful medium, I guess. And I guess going back to the earlier convo of what does it mean to be a reader, I kind of feel like to say you don't read is silly, especially in the modern world. Like everybody's on their phones reading texts and this and that. Obviously, it's not the kind of reading we're talking about in a meditative sense. But even just to be like, oh, I don't read at all. Like, it's like you probably read news articles or you're reading content that is evoking some type of emotion within you more than you realize, I guess. So it's kind of all around you, right? Billboards, slogans, ads. It's all giving you messages. And Be Here Now resonated with me. But at the end of the day, it's just 3 words. But you can extract a lot of meaning from something very simple.
Yeah, I mean, not reading seems to be a point of pride for some people, although I'm not sure why. Like, what are you trying to communicate to me? That's like always been the thing that I've wanted to know. Or do you not want to seem pretentious and you associate being pretentious or being very serious or learning all the time? Is it a matter of association? Somebody has certain associations about what it's like to read or what it is to read, as you said. So maybe they do read exclusively the newspaper, but they feel that they can't say that they read because it's the newspaper. It's not Tolstoy or something like that. I can't remember what author it was, but somewhere or sometime I saw, it was like an interview with someone who had written a book, and they were talking about how at an event, a fan came up and was like, you saved my life with this book. And they were just like, well, you did that. I didn't do anything, right? The result of you changing your life or seeing something differently is ultimately, and maybe in some ways it can't be solely attributed to either the author or the reader. It's sort of like an interplay between the two. If the reader hadn't come across that specific text, would they have still had that revelation? I don't know. But it's also true that the author did not make them have that revelation or what came after the revelation.
It's a guided meditation because there is a bit of yin and yang, for lack of a better word. Like the author did something, but the reader also did something, right? And that is what I think is kind of underappreciated sometimes. Because, I don't know, it's kind of to be a writer and touch someone or move them like that has to be kind of a weird sensation, right? To be like, whoa, you evoked something with some complete stranger. You never talked to them. You don't know what they look like. You know nothing about them. But it was able to resonate with them. Or they were like, wow, I feel seen by this person I'll never meet. I don't even live in the same country. This is translated. And it's like they're just capturing the human experience and what it means to be a human so vividly sometimes that it's pretty fascinating, honestly.
I mean, I like what you said about writing helps you feel seen, because I think, or reading helps you feel seen, I guess. Because ultimately, I think that is partially why I've always liked reading a lot, is because I've been able to relate to people through books, sometimes in ways that I couldn't in person, or, you know, when I was younger and I didn't have people to talk to about certain things. It's like, oh, you know, they kind of come up in books and you can work things out that way, which is interesting. But I also think the thing with reading that's kind of universal is you kind of realize that you have more in common with everybody than you think, because you might, like, it's me reading Carl, who's my parents' age, like our parents' age. He's 58, born in Norway, lived in Sweden. He's had 2 marriages, he has kids. We don't have that much in common on paper, right? Except for I do relate to him in a lot of ways, like through the way that he writes and emotions he's felt that I have also felt. And I think it's like about connection ultimately, and that interplay between the author and reader.
And I guess that's a potential hope of the pod then too, right? The magical salons specifically, the idea of trying to just connect as well, but then using the medium of podcasts too to kind of interact.
Well, and to riff on my prior comment, I think another reason that people reject reading is because schools have ruined reading for a lot of people. I remember having to read The Scarlet Letter over the summer, and we had to annotate the meaning of every color. Each time it appeared, we had to notate, like, what was the page, what was happening, what does it mean in terms of the symbolism. And it's almost just like busy work and kind of mind-numbing, but then it takes it away from the actual process of reading. But then in terms of school more broadly, they often want you to regurgitate certain things back to you about the book, and you can't really have any real opinions about it. Even in grad school, you know, the teachers would assign books that you knew they liked. So then if a student was like, oh, like this was kind of not that good, or I didn't like this aspect of it, like sometimes the teachers would get defensive because they were like, well, I liked it, so nobody can criticize it. But I think ultimately reading is so personal and is so subjective. That's the definition of art. And so you have to be open to the fact that nothing's gonna please everyone.
That's true. I feel like, yeah, there's some of the ego though. They're like offended that you don't like what they like, so they're like hurt, right? Instead of just being like, whatever. Like that's a portal for me, it wasn't for you, moving on. Something you said though, in school you'd have to annotate in books. So writing in book, is that smart, or is that like, you know, sacrilegious to the sanctity of the perfect book with the uncreased spine and untouched pages, right? That you could get an extra $1 for at half price when you sell it later versus, you know, annotating it, dog-earing, post-iting.
I mean, they say that you should take up space in your life, and I feel that writing in books is a way of embodying them and embodying your life. And again, if you go back to the school thing, nobody has all the answers, right? Just because this is a classic and it's a well-renowned book doesn't mean that I'm gonna like it or that I have to like it, something which is not an idea abided by in school. But I want to argue with the writers in the book. I want to write little reactions or little ha-has and underline things because that's part of the fun of it.
I was always very particular with my books, but then at a certain point, maybe in college or after, I was just like, yeah, I don't care anymore. Like, it's my book. To your point of taking up space in it, or whatever the phrase that you said was, which was good. But yeah, it's my book at the moment, so I'm going to use it how I want. But more than that, I'm going to annotate it for myself. Some of these books are portals. Solenoid was a really great book, right? But I don't want to read all 6, however long that book is. So, I could just flip to a random page and, oh wow, that was a really good paragraph I bracketed around or something. It's kind of, in some ways, leaving kind of like little breadcrumbs. So it's like, this was a portal for me, this 600-page book. But these like 30 pages that I put a little note in, those ones, like, that's the good stuff specifically. Or that's, you want to pay attention there because it's cool. Kind of leaving a trail for yourself, but also future people that might read that book. So if you pick up a book that I've already read, you can kind of see points that I thought were good or moved me and vice versa. And I think that's a cool element of writing in books, is it kind of adds a third person to the conversation, because now it's the author's story, my reactions or my underlines, and then you're also the active reader now, and you're seeing all 2 of those before you on the page.
It's like also like a snapshot of time. in terms of two respects, because you have the snapshot of time where the book was published, then when the person wrote in the book, then you reading it. It's similarly to I'm reading Mrs. Dalloway, which was published May 1925, and it takes place on a single day in June 1925, and it is June 2025, so it is exactly 100 years later.
And it's interesting though, because how do they describe it? Are they complaining about the heat?
I mean, it's London, so I don't think it's that hot.
Oh, really? It's hot here today, so it feels like June.
Yeah, it's hot here in London. We're in London.
Yeah, wee bit of crumpets.
Oh my god, I was thinking of crumpets too. Are there any books that you wanted to read for a really long time and you know that you will read at some point, you just haven't gotten to it yet? And what are those?
I will say, yes, one of them is the brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky.
Okay, why do you want to read it?
I think it's supposed to have some very, very famous, I might have even read, there's like 1 or 2 chapters where I think somebody's like talking to God or something. Like, I think it's got a lot of like deep religious things or something. And at the time when I read it, I think I was in high school going through my religious crisis or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I've heard a lot about it, and I feel like I read something else by them and liked it, Dostoevsky, but that one stuck out to me. I will read it eventually. And I think I did try reading it at one point, and I was like, I wasn't ready to make that time commitment, truthfully. What about you? Do you have any?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of books that I want to read, but I'm not sure if there's anything that I'm like, I must read this, because it seems like I just sort of gravitate towards certain books at certain times, and I just kind of trust that process, that if it's something I need to read at that moment, I will sort of gravitate toward it and then sort of experience asynchronicity, sort of like for Mrs. Dalloway. So I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of classics that I've claimed that I would like to read, but like when it comes down to it, do I care that much about reading them? Not really, no.
Well, what kind of classics? Didn't you get Anna Karenina?
Yeah, I don't think I'll read that. It's really long.
You've read plenty of long books.
It's not like gripping is the problem.
We've both read some tomes.
So for a while, I had a huge fear of tomes.
And what are you saying? Tomes for the listeners?
Yeah, tomes.
So just big ass books, basically, right?
Babs.
Babs. That's good. We could refer to Babs. But yeah, like a tome. What is a tome? 500 or more? 600? Some people, if it's like over 300 pages, they're not going to read it, right? It's like, there's no way I'm going to read it.
I don't know. Like a tome is a proper book, like a proper brick. Like the Priory of the Orange Tree is definitely a tome. I mean, it's like a big book where like you can slap it and it makes noise. I don't know. That's a weird criteria. It also depends on just like the way that the pages are and stuff. Like that was a tome by Stephen King. But I would be so afraid of tomes for a while because it just seemed like I would never be able to read that many pages, and I would get this like mental block and be incapable of reading it. But ultimately, if it's interesting and it grips you, you will read it. And that's how I have read tomes. Like Carl's struggle books are all pretty much tomes.
If it resonates, the page number or count is kind of irrelevant, right? It will just be an enjoyable experience. So it being long will be a benefit.
And that's why I like tomes now, especially fantasy tomes, because you're like, look at all this content.
Yeah, that's true. But like, okay, so now think of this. You were describing tome versus non-tome. I feel like you could hear it, right? So like, that's floppy, right? That's not substantial. Tome? You can just hear the difference, right? Like the heft.
And slap them. See if it makes a difference if you slap them.
That's the non-tome.
Yeah, you can tell.
That's a brick. You can, yeah. So that's, I guess, the auditory description of it. That's an NPR bit or whatever, where it's like, we walked up to the tree house.
Yeah, we should actually do something with that.
So all that to say, tomes. I'm definitely pro tome, as you know.
Yeah, I love a good bab. And so for fantasy, I love reading a finished series where there's like 5 or 6 tomes. So you have 6 babs and you're like, wow, look at all that content. That's gonna fill so many hours and that's gonna be truly incredible.
I think another just magical aspect of reading is like, obviously reading is powerful and has been recognized as powerful because it's been censored. Books are censored. There's been book burnings, destruction of books, or dispersion of certain ideas and stuff through the literary form or the written form. Childhood books again. Inkheart was cool. I didn't really like the actual book itself, but just the concept. Basically, it kind of involves breaking the fourth wall, I guess, or dimensions, because I think like one of the characters, and this is magic as reading, I thought, one of the characters, they had a superpower basically, where if they read a book, the character that they were reading would come to life in the real world. And that was always so cool to me as a kid to be reading. Additionally to magic, the Spiderwick Chronicles, the field guide to all the different animals and stuff.
Oh my god, I was obsessed with the Spiderwick Chronicles.
There's this whole world, right, of like mystical, magical creatures, but you can't see them unless you have like what, troll spit or goblin spit in your eyes and the glasses.
I mean, when I was way too old to be doing so, I had an actual field guide made from the movie, and I carried it around in my backpack and went down in the creek and looked for shit.
I mean, that's just fun.
And so you know those books that we saw on TikTok the other day? There was like a wizardology book and it came with a wand and it talked about wizards and magic and stuff. And I had that book and I loved it.
But you're, from a magical perspective, you are kind of taking the reins of your own journey, which I think kind of ties into that quote that you found for the words of wisdom, the weekly wisdom, from your current read, Mrs. Dalloway.
The compensation of growing old was simply this, that the passions remain as strong as ever, but one has gained, at last, the power which adds the supreme flavor to existence, the power of taking hold of experience, of turning it round slowly in the light. That was a great dramatic reading by myself.
That's a really cool quote, and that's kind of describing magic, right? As a kid, you can imagine all of the things in the world, but you have no autonomy to enact any of them. As an adult, if you maintain your creativity, you now have the agency to do it, right? It's like, okay, well then go do it. So that's what we're trying to do with the Magical Salon, the pod. But more than that, any concept as an adult, right? Oh, I want to get ice cream at 1 a.m. even though I shouldn't. Well, you can do it.
You can basically live in your fantasy world all the time. But I actually saw this TikTok and this guy was talking about how basically nearing 30 or becoming into your late 20s is the time when you start liking all the things that you used to like when you were like 12. There's like a resurgence of interest in those same types of things. And ultimately it comes back to the fact that you denied yourself those things because they weren't cool or you shouldn't be doing them or whatever reason it was when you were like 12, but you like discover it again. And in some ways that's the healing of your inner child, right? That process. But then also it's like your interests don't change that much. They can and do for some people, but some things remain the same.
The things you're describing remaining the same is just imagination and creativity, right? Like being a kid, everybody was a kid at one point. And everybody was like probably playing with sticks or army figures or like playing with things that are really lame, but making fun out of it, right? Like to your point of being in the creek with the Spiderwick Chronicles field guide. It's like that's being a kid, but that's just using imagination, right? But that's what gives people enjoyment in life, where now we're kind of getting to a place where everything's automated and already done. So you don't really get to be a participant in the creation of anything anymore, right? Being a kid is playing at all times, and I think reading is kind of a form of play.
I mean, just think about people that LARP, for example, or 30-year-old gamer dudes. both of those groups of people are looked down upon in terms of the eyes of society. Like, oh, that's lame. Like, grow up. Why are you doing that? But ultimately, that reminds me of like the healing of your inner child sort of thing. If it brings you joy, why, and it doesn't hurt anybody else, why should you stop doing it? I think sometimes people that criticize like that, it's just because they're jealous because they can't do any, like they don't have any joy like that because they like repressed all of their joys. And then they're like, why don't you do the same thing that I did? Give up everything you liked. Well, that's a wrap. Is
it? Are you signing us out, patroness? How do you sign us out?
Deuces, read a bab.
Yeah, read a bab.
Stop listening to this, go read a bab. Go play your inner world.